Keep social distance. Let's stay connected. We are in this together. These are familiar phrases as we work our way through the coronavirus epidemic. There is a strong desire to contain and to control the virus, with the fear of it spreading or even returning. Yet we do not want to lose connection with others, especially our loved ones. It's a time of the year that we associate with many social gatherings for family and for wider society. We may think of first communions, graduations, weddings, or even sporting fixtures. There is a sense of solidarity in our groups, where we are oriented outwards toward others and share their joyful occasions. Yet most of this has been put on hold. As social beings, it's natural for us to come together for different events. Our lives are intertwined. While we may like some isolation and distance on some occasions, we do not look for it in the long term. We recall the words of Genesis, where it says, "It's not good for man or woman to be alone." Now, even in small gatherings, we are advised to maintain social distancing, but it seems more like physical distancing. We can be close to someone who is far away geographically, but we may feel separate, removed, or distant from someone who lives next door. In a poem titled "Distance," John Boyle O'Reilly wrote, "The world is large when its weary leagues two loving hearts divide, but the world is small when your enemy is loose on the other side." Much of distancing and belonging is primarily at the heart level, not just physically. In his final conversation with his disciples before his passion, Jesus spoke of going away, but not leaving his disciples orphans. "A little while, and you will no longer see me. And again a little while, and you will see me." There would be a physical distance, but not an emotional or a spiritual one. Jesus reassured his disciples of his continued presence, but it would be a new kind of presence. The bond of love would not be broken. Jesus would go but send the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth, the Advocate, the Helper. And we celebrate this at Pentecost. This was a Jewish feast that came 50 days after Passover, when they celebrated giving thanks for the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Devout Jews would go to Jerusalem for the festival. They celebrated something they had in common, despite the diversity of backgrounds, nationalities, and languages. It acknowledged their unity in the midst of their diversity as God's people. Our Pentecost comes 50 days after Easter, our Passover, where we celebrate this support and help assured by Jesus in the presence and in the action of the Holy Spirit. It acknowledges our diversity and our unity, as it did for the first Pentecost and Jesus' disciples. The diversity of people in Jerusalem and the languages did not pose any obstacle to the proclamation of the message by the disciples when they had received the Holy Spirit. Divisions were broken down in a Spirit-centered event. A sense of distance and difference was not a feature in what happened. The way ahead opened up with the proclamation of the Easter message to the many who were gathered for the feast. Before Pentecost, the disciples were removed from the people at large, staying in an upper room. The disciples were keeping their distance physically and socially. Others outside were perceived as a threat. Then we have the account of the coming of the Holy Spirit, and all changed for them interiorly and exteriorly. And they left the house with a newfound confidence. To understand Pentecost more fully, it's helpful to contrast it with the story of Babel in Genesis 11, where we have the diversity of languages leading to separation and isolation. But Babel had a human focus, where the people wanted to make a great name for themselves by building a tower. Pride led to division. Different languages became an obstacle. Let us go down and confuse their languages there, so that they will not understand one another's speech. Their self-interest did not bring unity. Rather, it isolated and separated them. Whereas Pentecost reminds us of our being gifted by God and of our call to serve, to reach out to others in God's name. The Spirit is with us, within us. And with the power of the Spirit, we can face any challenge that lies ahead. Our beautiful Pentecost window by E.V. Hone in our prayer chapel depicts Mary in the midst of the disciples at the coming of the Holy Spirit. Jesus had entrusted the beloved disciple and all of us to her as mother on the cross. Now, this is an outward-looking picture, and there's a focus that's centered with Mary looking out. Mary is one with us in our gathering, in our unity with her Son. We celebrate this in a special way on the day after Pentecost, when we honor her as Mother of the Church. The Church can be seen as the community of Christ's disciples with her at the center. The window shows unity and the coming of the Holy Spirit sharing gifts. But these were gifts to be lived out. They were not just for themselves. They were to be shared. And the bottom of the window portrays this, because we have the reaching out, the caring for the sick, and bringing healing to the broken. Pentecost was not about containing, but sharing and spreading the good news. To some people, this message was more like a virus that spread rapidly, contaminating people. But it led others to believe in Jesus and come to a new way of life and of service. When many people were exposed to the Word, their lives changed, and they became part of the faith community. They were brought together and had a clear sense of belonging. Physical or social distancing did not fit into their lives. Now it is a world where people seek closeness and belonging, real relationships, and not just virtual ones. This contrasts with the distancing of the closing of borders or the excluding of people. Selfish desires, like the people of Babel, led to division, separation, isolation, and distancing. Pentecost does the opposite. As it is Spirit-filled, we see some of the fruits of this as the academic has brought many together, neighbours reaching out to each other, people aware of others in a new way. So may the current situation bring us closer to the Lord and to each other, for we belong together. God's desire is for unity and for social inclusion. Jesus prayed that all may be one. The Lord is not distant from any of us and desires us to be close to Him and to each other. He wants us to speak and understand the language of love, and of inclusion. We receive the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and we are to live them in caring for others as members of the communities and of the neighbourhoods in which we live. It calls for an outward-looking church that is at the service of others. Now, you may pray on this both before and after Pentecost. Texts that come to mind would be chapter 14 of John, which is the promise of the Spirit, and that he would not leave them orphans. The beginning of Acts chapter 2 tells of the coming of the Holy Spirit, and it's contrasted with Genesis 11, the beginning of that chapter, which tells of Babel. The final line of Matthew's Gospel is one, "Remember, I am with you always." Or if you like something on the fruits of the Spirit, you'll find them at the end of chapter 5 of St. Paul's letter to the Galatians. May the Spirit guide you and bless you these days, fill you with hope and confidence, and enable you to be good neighbours to each other.